Okay, here's the pecking order. Who is the wisest person in the audience? Or in this room? Who said that? Who said that? Who said you are? Diane, that is so good. You had a script, for heaven's sake. And how do you know that I'm the wisest person? What's the clue that you have? The oldest person is the wisest person. Always surround yourself with the oldest people that you can. Now, how do you know that they're wise when they're old? Next. Thank you. You know that they're wise when they're old because they made so many right choices. Now, I need help to make my choices, and that's your job. Here's your first assignment. I need longevity right now, because later on I'll show you I didn't have much in the way of genes. I need you, when you go through the exhibits and talk to the speakers here, to find every clue that you can about longevity. And the minute you get one, stop and run, tell it to me. I want to know it right then, because 5 minutes later, it may be too late. Okay, now I am, as I said, approaching my last decade of this century. Back in my day, we had a very simple way to know who the good guys were. I talked to Elliot Richards, I think, down here, and I think that he knows. How many of you here are over 80, by show of hands? Well, then you don't know about the days I'm talking about. Back in my days, we had a simple way where you could tell the good guys from the bad guys. As the movies came out, you could go to a movie and immediately, even though we were only 5 or 10 years old, you knew who the good guy was. What was the clue?
White hat.
White hat. Now you've got a double clue. Now, okay. Let's go back to the first one. How many of you believe the good guys always win? By show of hands. How many of you don't believe it yet? By show of hands. How many of you believe that the good guys always win eventually? By show of hands. Well, that's better. Remind me to put that in. Good guys win eventually. Okay. Now, there are 3 keys that we have so that the good guys will always win. We need to learn from the past. We need to prepare for the future. And we need to live in the present. We're going to do all 3 of those in the next few minutes. First, in learning from the past. Okay. I was shocked when I learned recently that a recent poll found out that more than half of the U.S. citizens believe that the nation's best days are in the past. How many of you believe that the nation's best days are in the past? How many of you don't? How many of you know that our best days are ahead of us? Okay, I like that. You know, I think we're here with the most beautiful, intelligent, and can you tell, you know how I can tell intelligent people? They agree with me. You can always find an intelligent person, they just nod. Okay. Okay, back. Now, you're right. Okay. Here's learning from the past. Some of you know who you're with here today. You're in the company of living legends at this convention. You're going to meet Diane Miller. She's a living legend up in Minnesota and across the world. Diane, would you stand up? She has made history, and she's making history every day, and she's one of the major reasons you can go state by state and have the right to go to herbalists and to go to non-medical practitioners, because she's at the state level fighting for your right for those practitioners. Back in 1962, I was fortunate enough to be chosen to go to Washington, D.C. Now, is that 50 years ago, or is that 60 years ago? I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Washington, D.C. as the legislative advocate for the National Health Federation. And if you'll let me go back here for just a minute, I was talking about living legends. One of them just walked in. Did you see his aura when he walked down the aisle? I mean, it was pushing out. I saw you people lean out from the side of it. How many of you know or have met Joe Wallach by show of hands? Look at that, Joe. I mean, we're in Joe Wallach country. Joe Wallach is my hero. He was my hero when I read in the paper one day that he'd been fired because he'd stood up for a principle and he refused to go for the fat bucks that he was making. And he just said no. He said, I know that selenium is a cure and treatment for cystic fibrosis. And when I read that in the paper, I said, I've got to have him. And Joel, tell me, come up here and tell what you did after that. Because I phoned him on the phone, and he was so reluctant.
Yeah, I have to appreciate, thank you, Clinton, God bless you. He's responsible for everything I do, good or bad. And the reason is, of course, when he called me, I had been terminated. I was a widower. My wife died. I had 4 little kids, no income, 4 little hungry mouths. And this answer to preventing and curing cystic fibrosis, I mean, it was drop dead, documented by all the big agencies. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation wanted. It was on 2020, and we're talking about big news releases from Emory University. And then when they discovered it was a nutritional deficiency instead of genetic, they fired me. And so Clinton calls me, I come out, and I had never heard of alternative health, because for 25 years, I was a pathologist for the National Institutes of Health, right? And I mean, it's about as mainstream as you can get. So Clinton introduced me to a whole new world, and it's been one of the greatest things that anybody could have. And so I certainly owe a great deal. We all owe such a great deal for this guy. I worked with him sort of on the sidelines for 25 years on the shade thing. And so let's give him a really standing round of applause, please.
Well, it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because it was here in this town when we were having a convention, and I said, Joel, you've got to come out to our convention. I'd never met him before.
33 years ago.
33 years ago. And I said, you've got to come to our convention. We need your kind of people. Now, he's a living legend. And if you will do what I've done, 50 years from now, you'll say, oh, I'm so glad Clinton told me to do this. I've got his books, and I make sure he autographs them. And he's here in person. You're rubbing shoulders with a living legend. And he's got a book or two. How many of you heard the tape, Dead Doctors Don't Lie? How many of you read the book? The book is much better than the tape. Much better. And that's hard to believe. Okay, let's go forward. We had the medical monopoly had so tightly this country in its grasp back in the 1950s and 1960s. You couldn't open up a paper but what you read about the quacks. And they had a PR firm that had labeled every chiropractor a quack, every health food store quacks, anybody who did not pay dues to and parrot the American medical mold as a quack. And I walked into this kind of a scenario in Washington, D.C., and I had some kind people who put their arms around me and they said, you know, you are fighting windmills. There's no way in the world you can change this town. Every congressman is bought and paid for by Big Pharma, and those that have not been bought by Big Pharma are controlled by the government, by the Food and Drug Administration, and or the AMA. Well, I was so dumb, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you could buy Congress. And so we simply introduced a bill to block their bill. And they had a proposal in the Federal Register in 1962. How many know what the Federal Register is by show of hands? Okay, the Federal Register comes out, and sometimes it's as big as a telephone book, and these are the brand new regulations that the government agencies put into effect in 60 days if you don't stop it. And I had a health food store in Washington, D.C. that called me up, and he said, have you seen the Federal Register today? And I said, no. He said, get it. And in there was a plan to destroy the health foods industry in one swoop. Now, what they had found out was that, and I'm talking about 1962, you have to, in your memory, go back when the health food stores were mainly bran and raisin and yogurt. But they had just started to make vitamin C in 100 milligram tablets, and we were wondering whether our ears would fall off if we had that potency. And so they said, we've got a problem here, because if people start to cure themselves without coming to a doctor and without going to big pharma, then we're dead, we're history. And so what we got to do is destroy them. And so what they did, they made a proposal that all vitamins and minerals would be limited to a very small, non-therapeutic level. In fact, they took the RDAs, which were ridiculously low, and they said you can have 50% more than that, and anything over that is a drug. It would have destroyed in its infancy, in its crib, the health foods industry. Well, we went to Senator Proxmire of Wisconsin. I met some people from Wisconsin. Who's here from Wisconsin? I'll tell you, he was one of the greatest statesmen I've ever met. William Proxmire would run to the Senate every morning. He was lean as a greyhound, and he was taking about 1,000 to 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C. And I went into his office and I said, do you realize you're taking a drug? And he says, how? And I said, according to the Food and Drug Administration, anything over 90 milligrams, and he was taking more than 10 to 30 times as much as that, is a drug. And he says, that is not right. And I said, well, will you introduce a bill? And he did. He introduced the Proxmire vitamin bill. Now, what we did then was what we're asking you to do now. And that is, we began to make out a form letter, because back in those days, there wasn't a health food store that didn't have my form letters in them. When you go into a health food store, they were mom and pop stores, and they said, sign this form letter before I weigh on it. And so we asked the people to ask them to introduce and to get their congressman to co-sponsor the Proxmire vitamin bill. And they did. And we put more mail into Washington between 1962 and 1976, when we finally got that bill passed. It took us 14 years. We put more mail into Washington than they got on anything else except Watergate and the Vietnam War. And we did it by the device that you have in your hand. How many of you have already signed the form letter? Good. How many of you have passed it in already? How many have not passed it in? Raymond, would you walk down the aisle? Well, okay, just hold it up. And pick them up, pass them to the end, pass them to the aisle. Now these are solid gold, because in this letter, now those of you that have signed it, you get a new blank copy to go home and copy, just like I did here at the hotel. Because for a penny or a dime, you can make these copies, and then you do exactly back home what I'm doing here. And this is the way we got more mail into Washington on this issue than on anything else. We need to educate, not threaten, not bully, just educate. Because the people who don't believe like we do only believe what they believe because they haven't been taught what to believe. We know the truth. We're good guys. We know that freedom and nutrition is the answer. And so let's read this together, this form letter. And then those of you who want an extra one to take back so that you've got the phone number. Isn't it nice to have Obama's phone number? How many of you noticed it right at the top of the form letter? How many of you would like to have it back? Okay. Make sure that you look at that, because you can call Obama every day. And I hope you will. I hope you will. How many of you read Luke 18 by show of hands? That is the story of the most powerful woman that ever lived. And here's the way the story goes. It says that there was a woman, she was a widow. Now back in those days, widows didn't have Social Security. You didn't get lower than a widow. They had no power whatsoever. And she had a problem, and so she went to the judge. And the judge brushed her off. He said, I don't fear God, nor yet regard man. He had a lifetime appointment. There was no way in the world she could threaten him. And he said, yet I will give this woman what she asked for. And then do you remember the reason? Who said it? I didn't hear you.
She kept petitioning over and over.
Yes, lest she weary me with her continual coming. Most powerful words ever written. If we just understand this, and we did understand it, because we knew we were dealing with little widows who had no money, but they knew how to go back over and over and over again, just like wives do when they talk to their husbands. They don't threaten their husbands. They just know how to come back. And they just keep repeating it in different ways until finally the husband says, I had an idea. When they get it, they said, I just had a marvelous idea. You did? What is it? And they get it. Okay. Here we have at the top of it. If you'll notice this, it says the phone number, and this is the for comments line, 202-456-1111. When you dial that, you'll get President Obama's comment line. And they have the most competent, professional people to receive your comments. Make it short. All you need is, and I've got it right at the bottom, please withdraw your support for nuclear power. It couldn't be shorter than that. Did you know that Obama is now the #1 leader in the world for wanting to rebuild the nuclear power industry? Did you know that? In fact, Raymond, if I could get the Wall Street Journal that we found yesterday. Yesterday, I went over to the marvelous library you have in Schaumburg here, because I had heard the good news. Now, I've got bad news and good news. The bad news is that we've got to do a lot of education with Obama. Because here in Illinois, where he came from, 50% of all electrical power is made with nuclear power. Did you know that? One of the highest states in the United States, 50%. The rest of the United States, about 25%. So he was so thoroughly convinced that nuclear power is clean. How many of you think it's clean? By show of hands. How many of you know it's very dangerous? By show of thank you very much. Okay, I'll tell you what it is. I've got it. You can write this down because I didn't have a chance to make a copy of it for you. The Wall Street Journal for May 30th, and you can get it from your library just like I did here. For May 30th, just a couple of weeks ago, had this feature article in it. It said, Germany, this is the good news. Already got Joel shaking his head. Germany to forsake its nuclear reactors. Let's have a hand for Germany. And do you know who's the head of the country there? A woman. Who are? I mean, they have courage and they recognize that they're there to protect the next generation. I can't wait till we have a president and a vice president that's a woman here. I really can't wait. Now, Germany to forsake its nuclear reaction. I'm going to read just a little bit of it. It says, Berlin, Germany on Monday said it would close all of its 17 nuclear reactors by 2022. A sharp policy reversal that will make which will make it the first major economy to quit atomic power in the wake of the nuclear crisis in Japan. Now, of the 17, they're going to close 7 of them immediately. So about half of them are being shut down immediately because of the power of this great woman. She had courage. I mean, this takes courage because all the rest of the world, they've got 150 brand new nuclear plants on target. And they don't worry too much whether they're on a nuclear fault or near a tsunami or as a Chernobyl, which wasn't by either one of them, just plain dangerous. And here's what she said. Well, this is what, yes. The path sets out a great challenge for Germany, she added, where we can be the first industrial country to make the transition into an age of highly efficient and renewable energy. Now, Germany is already way ahead of the rest of the European Union as far as renewable energy, but they have a goal by, I think, about 2050 to have 80% of it renewable, and we're not talking about uranium. Now, here's the bad news. And it's not bad, it's just the idea that I have not been doing my work. If I was doing my work, this would not be here. And frankly, we let the ball drop because we had a very powerful anti-nuclear group in America 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that stopped the making of any nuclear power plants. We haven't made a new power plant in America because of the momentum. But each year they'd had so much PR working on it that they whittled it down and then they measure it and they find out that we're going down about 1% a year in the number of people that are opposed to it. In Germany, 70% of the people are adamantly against nuclear power. In the United States, it's less than 50%. Now, here's where Obama stands. On Monday, the Obama administration repeated that the U.S. intends to push ahead with efforts to revive the U.S. nuclear power industry while learning lessons from the accident in Japan. What lesson could you learn from the accident in Japan? Don't build anymore. That's the one lesson you can learn from it. If you have anything as disastrous as that, and what we're doing, if you read the paper, but it's not hitting the headlines, what's happening is they're in denial. They were in denial from the beginning. They're admitting that they've had meltdowns there. Everything that they did in Japan is as typical as what they do in the United States when they make a big boo-boo. And they say, well, maybe if we deny it, all it does is amplify it to the point that people don't trust anything that comes from the government, and certainly not about nuclear power. The one lesson that we can learn from the accident in Japan is don't build anymore and decommission those that are now built. The administration is committed to increasing our nation's clean energy. Now this is strange. This is the Wall Street Journal. This is Obama. Clean energy. How many of you think that nuclear power is clean energy by show of hands? How many of you think it is not by show of hands? Now, once you know in your heart that it's not clean energy. I asked one girl that I just met coming in here, I said, what do you believe in? She says, health, freedom, that's what I'm here for. And I said, would you die for it? She says, I'll have to think about that. But we had people when we were fighting nuclear power back when they were chaining themselves to the gates of nuclear power plants that were willing to die for it. We are here today because people were willing to die for our right to be able to come here and let me talk to you about things that are not in accordance with the orthodoxy. We have to be ready to die for it. And I'm not asking you to die for it yet, but I am asking you to write that, sign that letter, make copies of it, but as much as anything else, I'm asking you to call every day to Obama's contact line. Every day. It doesn't take you a minute. Pick up the phone, dial it, and say, I want to talk to the comment line. It goes in. Do you know what's going to happen? It'll start out with a little trickle, then it'll raise to a good-sized brook, then it gets to a raging flood, and you know about floods back here. And when it gets up to the flood level, Obama's going to take a new look at it, and he's going to say, maybe the trend is to make really clean energy. Because we've got enough wind. As we crossed, I drove in from St. George to this meeting today. There, he drove for me. And the wind was blowing. The wind was blowing. I mean, I walked across the state, some of the states where the people were walking like this because they had to learn to walk into the wind. They didn't know how to walk straight up. We've got enough wind power alone in this country to produce all of the energy that we need and ship some to Canada and Mexico. Wind only, without going to solar. And when you add wind and solar together, but you know, you've got to pour the same kind of money into it that they poured into nuclear power. You don't do it with a 300 or 400 foot windmill. You pour real money into it and you make sure that every farmer is producing and selling wind power, electricity from his place, because they can go into the grid here, but we've got to really concentrate on it. White House spokesman Clark Stevens said President Barack Obama, whose home state of Illinois relies on nuclear power for nearly half of its electricity, has long supported expanding nuclear energy, has long supported expanding nuclear energy. He's believed this all the time because he's been taught to believe it, to say, as part of an effort to increase power sources that emit little or no, and then what's the key word? Carbon dioxide. As though that's the definition of what clean energy is. We've been so focused away from what the real danger is that we're looking at carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is like a teddy bear compared to the ferocious cobra that is in every speck of nuclear power. Please, Joel.
Well, Clinton, carbon dioxide is to plants as oxygen is to people.
Sure.
You cannot grow food without carbon dioxide.
Speak to those people in the back.
If we have extra carbon dioxide, instead of spending trillions of dollars to dig holes to pump it into, grow more food. That's what you do with carbon dioxide.
You know, I can always tell a brilliant person. They agree with you. You notice how brilliant that man is on the front row. Okay. I know you like the rest of this article, but Germany's... Now, I want to say this word about France. I like France. And I think on some things that they're great. But they're held up as a model of nuclear power. They're using almost 3/4 of their electrical power comes from nuclear power. And they say they've had no problems. Do you know why they've had no problems? Do you know where they ship their waste? They ship it out of France. They don't bury it in France. The French would never tolerate it. They ship it out of France. Now this is the most diabolical, long, short-sighted, inhuman way of treating this continent. They ship it down to Somaliland. Way, way out. And then they found out, one of those big scandals was they found out that once the people were paid to ship it away, they would go out into the ocean a little bit, and they said, why go all the way to Somaliland and dump it in the ocean? So we've got a lot of France's nuclear waste in the bottom of the ocean that is poisoning our seas. Now, I'm not emotional about this. If you ever get me emotional, you've got white heat. So let's go to the next one. Oh, my hero. John Paul Jones. I have to tell you this story. Ray knows this because I had 4 sons and 2 daughters and 4 sons. And I would over and over and over and over again read them the story about John Paul Jones. Who knows who he was? Who doesn't know who he was? I can take a hint. John Paul Jones was the father of our U.S. Navy. And if it weren't for John Paul Jones, you and I may not be sitting here today, because Britain at the time so ruled the waves that we had some really tough people that knew how to raise muskets here in America. But if you couldn't get supplies to them or shell, you know, the cannons that we need, we would have lost the war. John Paul Jones came in and we gave him one little ship. Do you know what the ships were made of in those days? 12 inches of solid steel, right? What were they made of? Wood. They were made of wood. So he put him in this little wood ship. And do you know where he set off for? He set off for England. One ship. He's going to attack the greatest nation in the world, the greatest naval in the world. So he heads off for England. How long do you think the word took to get out of England? It caused a panic all up and down the English coast. They said, here's the way his ship looks. His little ship comes up, and he would sail up and down. But he wasn't looking to panic the people of England. He was looking for their biggest warship. And he found it. And it was surrounded by the rest of the English Navy. So he sailed right up by it. And they had beautiful cannon. We had gunpowder in those days. Beautiful cannon, dozen or more cannon on the side. He couldn't go up on any side of that ship without a cannon pointing right into his wooden ship. He goes right up next to it with his few cannon, and they started shooting it out. Well, how long do you think it took before the Boheme starts to sink? I mean, it was kindling. And so the captain of the, I love this story. I love this story. The captain of the British ship says, "Are you ready to surrender? Are you ready to give up?" And then what was his famous words? "Give up, never. We've just begun to fight." And that is so American. That is why we're here. It's because it's in our hearts, and it's in my children's hearts. And I have one little side story on this. My wife, of 4 children, was feeding them one morning, and she had some beautiful pancakes and a boysenberry sauce for them. And she was making them as fast as she could, and they were eating up faster than she could make them. And so finally she just said, "Would you please stop?" And my oldest son stood up, magnificently stood on his chair with boysenberry dripping from his knife, and he said, "Give up, never. We've just started to eat." Now, next one. Prepare for the future. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I hope that all of you know who your U.S. representative is. And I hope, more than that, I hope you know them and visited them in the last short period of time. Go to their meetings. They come home. Go to these events. Meet them. Walk up and say, "You know, I know of a doctor who knows the answer to diabetes. I went to a convention, and I've got a doctor who can save the United States about $10, $20 billion a year because he's got the answer to diabetes with 2 trace minerals, primarily, and then a change of life, but primarily chromium and vanadium. I just tested them. Chromium and vanadium. Now, if we can cure diabetes, which costs the average person, or costs the average taxpayer $600 a year, costs the United States $18 billion, and that's one of the things that's causing our health care costs to go up astronomically, which is causing us to go into bankruptcy. Is that, say, 10 seconds or 10 minutes?
Minutes.
Minutes, good. Then I better start moving on fast. Every person should be anxiously engaged in a good cause. It doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take long, a minute, just to call President Obama and say, "Here's what I want you to do." And you're giving it to a comment line. They're telling them. They go in by weight. Now, Monopoly, we have been taught, is a harmless game. When I grew up in the Depression, that's what we used to spend our time doing. We'd sit on the porch and play Monopoly. And we were taught that it was perfectly harmless to have a Monopoly. How many of you think Monopoly is a good word or a bad word? How many of you think it's a good word? How many of you think it's a horrible word? It is terrible, and especially when you hyphenate it with medical monopoly. We have a medical monopoly in this country that is bankrupting not only us, but the whole world. Now, medical monopoly is not a game, it's a ruthless oligarchy. Oligarchy is a form of government in which the power is vested in a few. Is there anything that better describes our power over our health than an oligarchy? We have an oligarchy, and Jonathan Nemore teaches us that word. Medical oligarchy, monopoly, is the #1 cause of death in America. Did you know that? By taking the medical approach, it's number one. It's number one. But worse than that, it is the number one cost. The reason that we're bankrupt, why we're trillions of dollars in debt, is that we've taken that approach. The Food and Drug Administration and the Federal Trade Commission are controlled by America's medical oligarchy monopoly. Now, I'm going to give you a real fast course in lobbying. We have in the United States a little book that's about that thick, which is the laws that govern the Food and Drug Act. In there, it defines what a drug is. The definition of a drug is law, because it says that a drug is any article, that's the key word, any article that is used to diagnose, cure, prevent, or mitigate a disease in man. How many of you take vitamins and minerals to mitigate or cure a disease or to prevent it? How many of you take vitamins and minerals to prevent disease? Did you know that by the definition, you're all taking a drug every time you do that because of that flaw in the law? Now, hopefully, we're going to get Norman Singleton, who's here with Ron Paul. He already got one bill in there, but we hope that we have the 3-word amendment. And the 3-word amendment is okay, 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 okay. Next. The 3-word amendment to correct the flaw in the law. After articles, we will insert other than food. The law will then read, the term drug means articles other than food intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, or prevention of disease in man or animals. Do you see it? Now, I'm not talking about a 2,000-word or 2,000-page bill. I'm talking about 3 words. Once we get these 3 words, and I talked to somebody who is here who knows that Chavez of Utah has just introduced a bill. If we can get him to introduce this bill, then we'll have our form letters out, and you'll be asking your congressman to please co-sponsor the bill, and we'll call it the Foods Are Not Drugs bill. This needs to be done, and we need to have every person passing these out and calling their congressman. My time, please. How much time? Okay. Oh, I have to show you this. This is on a personal note. My great-grandfather, who was German, by the way, died at 83. I would hope that his son would have lived to be 100. But my grandfather, his son, died at 67 with cancer. And my father died at 59 with a stroke. Now, as I read those numbers, I go from 83 to 67 to 59. I lose 8 years every generation. And so I planned on dying at 51. And that's why your assignment today, as you go out of this convention, is to find ways to extend my life. I'm on borrowed time. I'm on borrowed time. And so are we all. Now, you're here today as some of the most beautiful people I've ever met. I believe that of all the happy people that I know, we've got about 100 of them in this, over 100, maybe 150 in this room. These are the happiest people because they're the healthiest people. Healthy people are happy. Free people are even happier. And I hope that you'll write it in your heart someplace and ask this question that I asked this young girl. Are you willing to die for it? And I hope you'll say yes in a minute. If there's no other way, oh, Raymond just reminded me that I've not even talked about the clinic that got closed in Oregon. How many of you heard about the clinic? This is one of the most outrageous things in the world, and I've given you, those of you that came early, have a pink fuchsia 2-page letter. We'll let you read that and then share it with other people. This was outrageous. It parallels what happened to Jonathan Wright. You know, about 30, 40 years ago, they bought a SWAT team in Jonathan Wright's Tacoma clinic in Seattle. And they took his product and his computers and so forth, and he was our great martyr of that day. Well, people have forgotten Jonathan Wright. He's here, and I want you to listen to him and get his story. Now we've got one that is many times worse. In this one, they had dozens of SWAT team people Expo, came in with their guns, but this time they went into 3 agencies. They had IRS, they had the FDA, and the FBI. Thank you. FBI. Now, what was the purpose of having dozens of people to go into a little bitty company with 10 employees, with 80 people, with 3 van loads? They went in and took all of the equipment. Now, is Dr. Stiles here, Stites? I don't see her here, but she's down here. They even went over, he has a big gym, and he's invented a machine, and it's down in the exhibit hall. I'm going to make a beeline for it as soon as I get through here, and let's see if I can get the number of it. It's booth number 219, and there's a Carolyn Stites. Now, they seized about 27 of these exercise machines. It was invented by the man who owns this Maxim company. And they didn't have any reason in the world to do it because it wasn't a dietary supplement, but they thought, well, we're sweeping it up, let's take it along with everything else. And then as soon as they got it, they shipped it all over. These now, the 3 van loads are spread all the way from Seattle down to Oakland, down to Los Angeles. So they make it very, very difficult to get it back. And I'm going to have a form letter out to you asking to have it returned, just very simply, return that material. There's a right way. If a person's, when I was driving out here from St. George, I would have appreciated if I was going over the speed limit, which he never let me do. But if I was, I would appreciate if a policeman would pull me over and say, do you know you're exceeding the speed limit? And I would say, thank you very much, and he'd say, don't do it again. That's the way we enforce the laws in this country. We don't do it with 80 people coming in, with car after car, with blowing whistles and pull me over and saying, look, we're going to take everything out of your car because you were speeding. He had no fault. They didn't have one single complaint. Nobody had been hurt by any of his products. In fact, I'll tell you the secret of why they went after him. His products are very good for autism. Any of you have autism problems in the family? Autism? You get the product right now. Autism and Alzheimer's. And they're after autism and Alzheimer's because that's the new mecca for the medical profession. They know that they can give us a tremendous amount of drugs that go on forever and ever. 1 minute. Okay, in my last minute, I'm going to thank you for being health freedom advocates. Who came the furthest distance here? Who came from more than 500 miles? You came from California. How far did you come from? Tennessee? Wonderful. Where'd you come from? We got one that came from England. Would you give her a hand? Stand up. Okay. Yes, question.
What are we going to do to change the food safety bill? Because its intent is to put out the farmers that are growing clean beef, clean food, and protect the factory farmers.
That's a perfect question, and I'm going to repeat it. What are we going to do to kill a food safety bill? Because the purpose is to really attack the organic industry. It's going to be right. We've got some form letters on the way. This tech age I do not understand. I'm still back in smoke signals. But I do the best I can. And we will have it so that you can get these form letters that I'll make, and we'll have the food safety bill. The minute you get logged into my website, then I'll have the form letters, and then you write your congressman so that they know that they've got to stop it. Yes, please.
The other thing about your nuclear power, are you aware that China has plans for 27 nuclear power plants?
She said that, am I aware that China has the plans for 27 power plants? And I am very well aware of it. In fact, they have 150 on the drawing board right now worldwide. And that's why we've got to take this little victory that we've got in Germany. Switzerland has said no more, but they're still hanging on to the others. And of course, Japan is not going to make it. And we've got to take that little victory and make it grow into the United States. Once the United States stops it, then we put a major break on it. Thank you very much. The website is Clinton Ray Miller, healthfreedomfighter.com, and you can see him presenting
to the subcommittees. It's pretty interesting.
I didn't know that.
Clinton Ray Miller, Health Freedom Fighter. Put that in, you'll get to it. .com.
Any other questions? We have time for one last question. Back there, please.
What do you think about geothermal, ocean wave power, and desalinization plants with pipe systems for cleaning water?
I think that they're way at the top, and they're going to be part of this total clean energy. And we ought to focus, we ought to spend the money for that we've been misspending for nuclear power. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.